You're watching all this go down in LA and wondering, why are Mexican workers treated like outsiders? Here's the wild part. They're not outsiders at all. California used to be Mexico. Before the US snatched it up, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Colorado, all Mexican land. Facts. In 1848, after the Mexican-American War, the U.S. forced Mexico to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That treaty gave the U.S. half of Mexico's land. Half. And they paid Mexico just $15 million for all that territory. 15 mil. That's less than one penthouse in Beverly Hills today. That's robbery. That's why so many cities in California have Spanish names. LA, San Diego, San Jose, that's Mexico right there, just renamed. And even after all that, Mexicans stayed, worked the land, raised families, contributed to everything from farming to construction to culture. And now they're being treated like criminals in land that was once theirs. History didn't start in 1776 or in 1848. We need to understand that what's happening now, these ICE raids, this military occupation in LA, it's part of a long legacy of displacement, theft, and control. You want to talk about immigrants? Cool, but let's talk about how America immigrated onto Mexican land first. Don't forget that. Remember?
Today's order makes clear that he is not above or beyond constitutional constraints. Constitution sets forth limits. The president is a constitutional officer. The president of the United States works under the Constitution. And so we are very gratified by this decision. His section that he asserted the authority to overrule the objections of a state governor, clearly in the 36-page order.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chakras and Cusswords. I'm so glad you cosmic baddies are here. We are going to dive deep into the immigration reform that is currently occurring, ICE raids, and the recent protest in Los Angeles, and also that are occurring nationwide. So what is happening? Because some people might not be sure, but let me just kind of give you a background, and we're going to dive into the astrology as well. So ICE is conducting a bunch of raids, especially in the Los Angeles area and in California. For the most part, California is considered like a sanctuary state, very much like a sanctuary city. And the city of Los Angeles has deep roots to the Mexican culture. California used to be Mexico before it was basically stolen. We'll get into the history a little bit, but for the most part, this is indigenous land, and it's always been indigenous land until the settlers, the pilgrims, however you want to say it, the Spaniards, the white folk came and conquered. But this land is rooted in indigenous culture. So on June 6th, the ICE government decided to start to arrest people and began to have community raids. And also a lot of these raids occurred in workplaces, even the fashion district, Home Depot. There was stories being told that children were at graduation, schools, shelters, and even some emergency rooms when it was estimated about over more than 100 people were confronted by ICE, and they began to become arrested or taken into some type of detainee center. Okay, so let's get into the history of ICE. So the history of ICE is very controversial. It was created post 9/11 era, right around March 1st of 2003, under President George Washington Bush, I believe junior, not senior, junior. ICE was created in response of September 11th in 2001 and after the terrorist attacks that occurred in New York and also at the Pentagon. And it was just, I guess you could say it was just seen as a way of taking control of Homeland Security. So it was a part of Department of Homeland Security, the DHS. Prior to ICE, immigration enforcement duties were handled by Immigration Natural Services, known as INS, and also U.S. Customs Service, which both ended up being dissolved. So those services are gone, and ICE is now designed to basically be like a centralized intelligence driven force to protect national security. And it's also seen as a government group that is used to basically remove unauthorized immigrants who possibly may hold a threat to U.S. lands. So ICE has three major divisions. It's the ERO, the Enforcement and Removal Operations, which manages arrest, detention, and deportating undocumented immigrants. And it's most visible, and it's also the most controversial branch, right? Because this is the branch that is basically pulling people from their homes or pulling people from their workplace or pulling children from their parents. So that is definitely one of the most controversial branches of ICE. There's also Homeland Security Investigation, which investigates cross-border crimes, which include drug trafficking, human smuggling, cybercrime, child exploitation, and more. And that works globally, often with foreign governments. And there's also OPLA, which is the Office of Principal Legal Advisors, where ICE's legal team basically handles a lot of the immigration-related litigation. So if somebody's having court dates and all those things. The major shift and the controversies back with ICE and back with the 2000s was it was focused on terrorism and border control. The raids began to basically ramp up in areas where we would see that people were being raided in workplaces and also in areas where they were felt or you would perceive they would be deemed as safe. And a lot of the times, ICE would go in and raid a lot of undocumented employees. So it definitely had a lot of areas where it had some controversies where people were like, why are you going after undocumented workers who aren't necessarily convicted of crimes and they aren't necessarily criminals? Back in 2010, the Obama administration actually deported more immigrants than any of the U.S. presidents before him, earning him the nickname the Deporter in Chief. So it's very interesting. And I'm wondering if Trump is trying to break this record. I don't know. However, Obama shifted the ICE focus more towards off of removing those with criminal convictions rather than all of the undocumented immigrants. So at first he was kind of like on a roll, and then he kind of like took a breather and was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The DACA, Deferred Action and Childhood Arrivals, was introduced in 2012, protecting some undocumented young people from deportation. But we've been noticing with these recent ICE raids, that hasn't really been happening. So back in 2017, 2021, the first run of Trump, ICE became more aggressive under Trump's leadership, right? Under Trump's presidency. And he implemented a zero tolerance policy, resulting in family separations at the border and conducted large-scale workplace and community raids. He attempted to terminate the DACA and the TPS, which is the Temporary Protected Status, and he created a lot of public fear and distress, especially in the Hispanic and Latin communities. And that's why a lot of people were quite surprised that the Latin voting for Trump kind of took such a great lead with this recent presidency. So, what has occurred on the home front recently? So, protests erupt around June 6th, and they have become, I guess you could say, a little bit violent. Some experienced stun guns, grenades, tear gas, and it basically resulted in a curfew. Federal forces were deployed, and for the last week, there's been about 850 arrests that have been reported in LA. President Trump basically stated that he was going to deploy the National Guard, which he did, about 4,000 troops, and ordered about 700 Marines under Title 10, which is very rare to use federal military. Local leaders such as Gavin Newsom's and also Newsom and Mayor Bass have challenged these moves and actually have put out a lot of lawsuits and condemning it as unconstitutional and an overreach and basically infringing on people's basic human rights. The state's sovereignty, meaning the state is also seen as a freedom state and has a lot of civil liberties, and that Trump is violating these civil liberties. So ICE continues to spread, and the neighborhoods are fighting back. The barrios, the community, a lot of the collective is fighting back, and they're fucking over this shit. They're like, they want to abolish ICE, okay? So ICE has expanded its enforcements all the way through the agricultural hubs, all the way through the agricultural fields to the Home Depots where a lot of ready-day labor work. And they're basically trying to confine a lot of people and put these people in these detainee ICE holding cells. I don't know where. It's been reported that Glendale has actually removed their contract with ICE following these raids. The rippling effects are including all over the nation. We are now seeing protests in San Francisco, to New York, to San Antonio, and a lot of people are very upset about these mass deportations. And it's believed that there is going to be another protest occurring actually on June 14th, where Trump is going to do this big parade for the military. He's celebrating 250 years in the military. He's celebrating also his birthday because it's on June 14th. And people are pissed. People are fucking pissed. And they're trying to basically overturn this miraculous parade that is seen by Trump to an area of where they are showing that humanity is being compromised and civil liberties are being compromised as well. So as a whole, a lot of people are very upset. Some people, some people support this. Some people are downright against it. Me personally, I believe California is a sanctuary. It's too much tied into the indigenous culture. It's too much tied into the indigenous land for this bullshit to even happen here. This is basically Mexico. We are all indigenous. We were the first. Mexico's people were the first. Unfortunately, California is stolen land. And unfortunately, it's something Mexico is probably never going to get back. But a lot of people believe that nobody is illegal on stolen land. And I tend to agree. And that is my focus, is that people who come to this country who are doing it the right way, and to come to this country, most of the time you're going to do it illegally, and then you're going to clear your record and you're going to do it the right way. Most of the time you're not going to get a visa unless it's for travel, possibly education, possibly work. But to become a US citizen, it takes time, and it's also a big obstacle. And I don't know how easy it is for people, but for the most part, most people say it's quite challenging and very hard. And unfortunately, people have to leave their countries for multiple reasons. It could be to provide for their children. It could also be because there's violence in their community. It could also be they are a target of the cartel or whatnot. But a lot of times they come here to create a better life. And it's very unfortunate that as much as California is a big melting pot, a lot of this feels very targeted towards the Hispanics and the Mexican people, I would say, as a whole. And it's very sad because this land was built off of the indigenous and also slave labor. So I feel like in some ways, United States needs to clear its karmic cycles and allow people to make ends meet and also to create a better life for not just them, but also their children. So children are being ripped apart from their parents. We can't deny that. And to me, I just feel like if that's something you could live with as an individual and see no harm in that just because they are undocumented or quote unquote illegal, I don't know how you sleep at night. Let's continue. So let's look at the astrology. So the astrology basically is Jupiter is in Cancer now. So Jupiter is exalated in Cancer, which means Jupiter does like to be in Cancer, which this is fostering an energy of connection and also domestic empathy. I also see a lot of support systems really coming through with this energy. What's also interesting with this is this fostering movement of home, the Cancer, Jupiter, bringing this abundance of where everybody is seeing like, where is the collective's home, especially for people who are now considered undocumented and now considered like they need to get out, right? And we see how the collective is kind of like moving together to create a connection of solidarity and also to create a connection of not allowing the deportations to occur. So if you look at a lot of videos, you see a lot of people are fighting back against ICE. They're also fighting back against the deportations, and the community support is definitely out there for each other. However, what's interesting is it squares this energy of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, highlighting a lot of tension between expansion and also the energy of illusions. So Saturn and Neptune together in Aries, to me, I feel like it breaks the illusions and it also pushes the hard truths that fire, tension, aggression is the catalyst for a lot of movement that's occurring. Also, Jupiter's is a little bit of like an optimistic drive. So while Jupiter is creating this energy to drive, push harder, but the friction continues to mount, creating major breakthroughs and also creating major activity. I feel like when I look at the collective, that the collective is going to continue to push and continue to push and push. Could this be the start of a revolution? Could this be a start of Gavin Newsom's next presidential campaign? Possibly, because Gavin Newsom and Trump literally are going like head to head. It's definitely been a war of words between the two. Gavin Newsom's, I read his birth chart back in 2022, 2021 era time, and I thought he had some good potential possibly running for the presidential campaign, possibly in 2028. He has a nice Jupiter in Leo at 28 degrees, and that degree will occur in 2028. So it will be like his Jupiter in Leo, I guess you could say, return. So it's going to be interesting to see what occurs as the timeline continues. Jupiter is optimistic, and maybe a lot of us are going to remain optimistic and continuing to fight for what we believe is right and what we believe the power of the collective holds. So the Neptune and Saturn in Aries both has this transition that occurred in 2025, right in the springtime, right? And we still haven't even met summer yet. But it's a bold initiation of pushing society and our individual thoughts. And a lot of our individual thoughts are really being a reckon. It's a reckoning to mess with, like to mess with a person's individual identity and also to mess with the energy of structural reform and also systematic oppression. And people are just going to keep fighting, especially with Neptune and Saturn. And I do think we are going to see a lot of new leaders. We're also going to see a lot of new leaders that are going to use this energy of the warrior state to kind of protect the collective. Saturn brings a lot of discipline and that energy that confronts the hard facts and also confronts leaders. So Saturn likes things with a karmic energy. It likes that energy of moving in responsibilities and also in areas of determination and requirements. While Saturn does take away the energy of identity in some aspects, with it being in Aries, that Neptune injects this spiritual impulse that the collective is feeling, dissolving the old forms and traditions. So, could ICE be abolished? I highly doubt it, but I do think the collective is going to give them one hell of a fight to try to get it abolished. Together, this energy sparks a lot of new ideologies and it emerges a lot of new foundations. Now, let's talk about Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is the energy of revolution. So a lot of people are talking about revolution is coming. I definitely think with Pluto in Aquarius, there is a revolution coming. Pluto's entry into Aquarius, which occurred in 2024 in June, is that revolutionary wave of transformation with technology, power structures, social system, and collective consciousness. This energy screams of themes that include community. We see the community is fighting so fucking hard against this ICE raids. Like, I literally just watched a video of the community literally pushing ICE out of their neighborhood. Nobody got detained. The neighbors were fucking on their shit. They were like, you are not detaining my neighbor. I don't give a fuck. The area of listening to the authority is getting diminished. There's a lot of anti-authoritarian people right now. Listening to the systems, they're like, fuck these systems. These systems don't work. These systems are a joke. These systems were created off of slavery. These systems were created off of stealing land, of horrible things. And there's a lot of meaning behind deep systematic disruption. We have to remember, like, a lot of things occurred with disruption. So that closing of certain chapters, resonating with the collective and seeing how the collective can take away and also create new areas of revolution. The Jupiter in Cancer definitely pushes the emotional and community expansion that collides with the Saturn and the Neptune together in Aries, which demands the hard truths about security, boundaries, and vulnerability. I think a lot of us are seeing how vulnerable we are, how much government really controls us. And this mirror of the nation's struggle, right? This area of protection versus empathy versus care versus humanity, we really see how it's like portraying, how it's coming out. Another thing that's really interesting with this is we see, like, Trump's like, well, I'm not going to deport the agricultural people in the fields because that's going to fuck up the economy. It's like, no. You can't choose who you deport. Do you know what I mean? Like, they want it to benefit them to have the Mexicans working in the field, as one might say, but then they want to deport as many people and ruin many people's lives that aren't benefiting them. No, I feel like if you're going to disrupt a whole collective and a whole community of people, a whole culture of people, then there should be some disruption on your part too. Neptune and Saturn unmask the illusions that are mirrored in the exposure of immigration policies. It's basically the energy that is the crackdowns of what is occurring. The federal versus the local tension is just brewing in the area of identity. Pluto in Aquarius is the revolution that ties this all together. It certainly ties it all together. The bottom line is change is occurring, revolution is occurring, something is occurring that's really making people confront their own feelings, especially about immigrants, confront their own feelings about their neighbors, confront their own feelings about people in their own family, confront their own feelings about friends, and so on. It demands us to look at the ugly truth of our own interpersonal feelings, our emotional communities, humanitarian rights, and networks. We're growing stronger as a collective, being put under this pressure. And it's also creating a public awareness that is making the ugly no longer hidden, right? And how society chooses to care about only certain things at certain times. So this country was basically built off of slave labor and immigrants. But now we're choosing to enforce some type of contradiction that this country can run fine without immigrants, which is very, very delusional. Very delusional. On a systematic level, structures related to immigration and enforcement and the state's authority and civil protest will continue to go on. This matter is not going away anytime soon. I'm going to say we're probably going to see this whole topic probably all through the Jupiter in Cancer transit, which is about a year and a half, right? So we're definitely going to see this energy all through the Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer really resembles that energy of home. Now, I want to talk about the birth chart of the United States. So the birth chart of the United States, the sun is a Cancer. So that area is all lit up with that Cancer and Jupiter energy, is believed to be at 13 degrees in the 8th house of transformation. So when we look at it as a whole, this is really affecting the United States as a whole in areas of closing certain chapters and closing the area of movement. The moon is in Aquarius and it is in the 3rd house. The 3rd house gives that area of society, of social reform, social groups, communication, and the collective really moving forward. That is where Pluto is lying so nicely. We also have a Mercury in Cancer, a Venus in Cancer, and a Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is occurring in the United States. It's a Jupiter in Cancer return at 5 degrees in the 8th house. This is awakening. This is a huge awakening for the collective. Also, the area of Neptune in Virgo, Uranus in Gemini, at the 7th house of partnerships. A lot of people believe there's going to be a war in the 7th house of partnerships. When Uranus returns back to Gemini. Could it be a civil war? Could it be a collective war? Could it be a world war? We don't know. But what we do know is that when we look at the pattern of revolutions in history, it makes sense for it to occur again during this Pluto in Aquarius. Also, we have the ascendant in Sagittarius. All of this broke out around the new energy of the full moon in the Sagittarius, right? in a full moon in Sagittarius as we are in Gemini season, which is occurring in the first house. That energy is direct and it's also ruled traditionally by Jupiter, right? Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius. It creates this area of a greater understanding for the quest of freedom. Could that freedom be coming from the immigrants, the people who are here, the people who want to stay here? It also includes the energy of risk taking and making some more movements towards other areas. We also have a Chiron in Aries. That Chiron in Aries definitely feels like a fire is being started with the collective. I will say, when we look at what is occurring right now, this energy definitely feels intense right now. It feels so intense that this movement continues to happen with the United States. This energy is always very dominant because Jupiter is so aligned with the United States as we have it as a Cancer. So I'm not surprised that all this began to occur. So the overall chart for right now in the United States is the energy of kind of feeling very intense. And it also feels very centered around movement. The planets have shifted. The sun is in Gemini, right? The aspects definitely look to be creating a focus that feels very centered around movement. So we have a transiting Mars that's squaring the natal ascendant in Sagittarius. So this energy conflicts with internal tension and bringing a lot of effort that will occur over time. So I do think that this energy will continue to grow and continue to move. I do think that there is a possibility that this energy has just basically started. And we're going to see what continues to move forward. And we're going to continue to see what will happen as the years kind of continue. I do think the Uranus in Gemini is a aspect that a lot of people are nervous about. But I do think that the Jupiter in Cancer really woke it up, completely woke it up. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. I definitely wanted to talk about some of the astrology that was occurring. I didn't want to wait for the astrology dates to come out for July before I talked about this. So please like, comment, let me know how you feel about this, everything that's going on, all of the energy that has moved with the collective. And everybody have an amazing day. Bye.